I'd like to call this work session of the Town Board, Southampton Town Board, to order on this 27th day of May, 2021. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for
which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, please be seated. All right, Sunday, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Schneiderman,
Here.
Councilwoman Lostad,
Here.
Councilman Martell,
Here.
Councilman Bouvier,
Here.
Councilman Schivoni.
Present.
All right, so we're all here. We're gonna do this via Zoom. So we just had our first in-person town board meeting. I mean, there are some conveniences certainly to Zoom as we live, all throughout the town of Southampton. We're still allowed to meet via Zoom. So, it's a relatively short work session. I thought it was good for a Zoom format, but I'm going to play it by ear. There may be some that we do in person. All right, so we're going to start with a COVID update by Ryan Murphy, our Public Safety and Emergency Management Administrator. Ryan, do you want to give us a quick update?
Sure. Thanks, Supervisor. I'll keep it really nice and quick. As of the last time that we spoke to the hospitals, which was about 48 hours ago, Southampton was only reporting, one COVID patient in the whole hospital. So that's obviously a tremendous improvement from where we were at. The positivity rate continues to go down. Vaccines continue to be rolled out, although the demand is, definitely slower now than it was earlier on in the pandemic. The site at Southampton College is still open and operational and is taking walk-in individuals. So if you're still looking for a vaccine, that remains an option for you, and they're open until I want to say somewhere around like 6 or 7 o'clock at night. So following work, that should still be an available location for some people to try and take advantage of. The gathering limits and everything have shifted and increased. We're up to 500 people outdoors for non-essential gatherings. For non-residential gatherings, we're up to 250 people indoors for non-essential gathering numbers. For residential gatherings, which I just want to kind of point out going into this weekend, because there is some forecasted weather coming our way for Memorial Day weekend. So outdoor events could turn into indoor events. We do still have limitations on indoor residential gatherings from the state of New York. That limit is 50 people. Outdoor residential gatherings, the limit's up to 500, but there is a caveat there, and that is that social distancing is still supposed to be maintained unless, all individuals at the location are vaccinated individuals. And I highly doubt any individual homeowners are going to be screening people for vaccine cards, every single person that comes up to the property. So, obviously we're not telling people to throw 500 people onto, a quarter-acre lot and, pack them all in for an outdoor type gathering. Make sure that you're doing things intelligently. And going into this weekend, the CDC is stressing it, and I know the state is delivering the same message, and that's that, unvaccinated individuals, people that have compromised immune systems or have folks at home that they don't want to track things back to, please act intelligently. If you're not vaccinated or not fully vaccinated, please continue to wear a mask where you're supposed to and in the situations that you're supposed to if you cannot maintain social distancing. We do not want to have gotten as far as we've gotten with this in pushing the virus back and stopping the spread as much as we've done in the last couple of months, only to have some sort of a post-Memorial Day spike. So if you're gathering with others, if you're not vaccinated, do the right thing, wear your mask until you can get to a position where you can be socially distant from other people. And if you have any kind of concerns, or if you think you're in a crowd and you don't feel comfortable, don't hesitate for a second to put the mask back on, even if you are vaccinated and you just feel uncomfortable with the situation. We still have to act intelligently. Supervisor, you said it the other night, we're not 100% out of the tunnel yet. We can see the light at at the end of it and we're real close, but that doesn't mean we're out of it yet. And people need to remember that and just, continue to do the right thing. We're so close to being at 0 levels, and we're so close to having no one with COVID in the hospital. We do not want to see a post-Memorial Day spike. So we just want to continue to deliver that message to people as we go into this weekend. Enjoy the weekend, but do so, intelligently, responsibly, and safely.
All right, any questions for Ryan? Ryan, I thought the in-person meeting went pretty well. Thank you for managing the crowd there. I saw you get up and when some extra people came in the room and tried to space some people out. So appreciate that.
Not a problem. I thought it went very well, and everybody did the right thing that was there, and we had masked people, unmasked people, and it was just everybody handled themselves very well.
And we had that rally in front as well. Okay. Anybody else have anything for Ryan?
Well, I just want to let Ryan know that last night we had our EMS advisory committee meeting, and they gave the town of Southampton, particularly Ryan, high points with his work during the pandemic, and particularly that in conjunction with the Southampton Hospital. They had a lot of pop-up sites that occurred in the past year, and the town was there for traffic control and organization in general. Things that need to happen, and those kinds of logistics really needed to happen to have these pop-up sites be effective. Robert Ross of Southampton Hospital let us know that over 66,000 people on the East End were vaccinated through Southampton Hospital. And this, of course, is in East Hampton, Shelter Island, and in the town of Southampton. They worked with the Hampton Bay School District, of course, and all of the other pop-up sites. And they're proud to report that this particular area of New York State has over 70% double vaccination. So they're proud of that and wanted to extend their thanks with the work that we did in the town, and particularly your office, Ryan.
Thank you. Very happy to hear that. And certainly the same compliments and then some need to go back to all of our EMS volunteers throughout the town and the hospital. We've all praised the hospital throughout this pandemic with how much they stepped up their efforts, and for our small little hospital, they accomplished quite the Herculean task here with regards to doling out vaccines and dealing with the pandemic and dealing with the surge to their hospital census during the pandemic for COVID patients. But the EMS folks that are out there, all of our volunteers within the community, supported each one of these pods that we saw that were out there. They were supported by EMS staff. That couldn't happen. We weren't allowed to run a pod. The hospital wasn't allowed to run a pod if there wasn't EMS staff that was able to support it, because we had to take precautions in case anybody had any kind of a reaction to the vaccine. So whether you saw them there or not, they were present, they were in the background, they were on standby, they were ready to roll, on top of just the efforts that they made, especially earlier on in the pandemic, where they were putting themselves at risk before we understood a lot about this virus. They still had to go out to calls throughout this pandemic. And a lot of the calls, probably 90% of them for a few months there, were all coming in as potential COVID calls. And it didn't stop the ambulances from rolling. You ask anybody that called for help during that time period, and they got the help. And that's a testament to the dedication of our volunteers. They weren't even being paid to go out and do that work. Our EMS volunteers were going out and putting themselves and their families, because they were coming home after that, at risk. And they definitely deserve a lot of credit for that activity throughout the pandemic too. So I'm happy that they were pleased with our efforts, but we definitely all owe them a debt of gratitude for their work during the pandemic.
I agree. And many of them were operating on skeleton staffs because of some of the issues that their members might have had with people who were particularly at risk in their families and their lives. So they had to be careful as well, and they did not miss a call.
Ryan, are you all moved into the new offices?
Yes, and in case you hear any weird noises in the background, that's the new roof that's being installed up above me. I'm hoping no one comes through and ends up on my desk while we're on the meeting here. But yes, we're all in. Obviously, there's still some boxes that are getting sorted out and put into cabinets of files. But we're in. All three divisions are over here. The fire marshals are here, codes here, and animal control. And we're loving it. It's a great space. It really puts us in a terrific location for a high population area. It's to the west side of the canal, so I know a lot of our staff that's traveling from up west appreciates the traffic the changes of the new office. But it's a good space, and we're over here. Certainly welcome any of the board members to stop by and see the new space when you get a chance.
Yeah, we will visit soon, I'm sure. So, it reminds us that, we're so used to your role as our COVID coordinator, but you also are in charge of fire and animal control and, of course, code enforcement. And this is Memorial Day weekend. So, there's always concerns about noisy parties, overcrowded parties, putting COVID aside. Because there's limitations on crowd size there, but we also have limitations in terms of, in terms of groups and, all kinds of, crowded, overcrowded rentals, all those things that, people packing people into a home for Memorial Day weekend. So I'm sure you're going to have a busy weekend with your other role in code enforcement. So,
Yes, we'll be out there.
And as this pandemic hopefully subsides, at some point we'll get, maybe you'll bring us up to date on the code enforcement operations. We used to do that. It sort of got put aside for the pandemic, but I know people continue to use SOS, and it's been a very successful system. But it would be nice to know, where we're seeing issues. And what we're doing about it.
Definitely. We have a report ready for you.
Okay. Oh, great. All right. Anything else? We have another minute before our next agenda item. Anything else for us, Ryan? All right. Well, let's then bring in Diana. I think that's my next piece here. Review of the town's housing plan. Or we want to get Diana in, Kara in. Gina Martini from VHB. She's a senior project manager. Jenna Shearer. All right. Do we have everybody? We're waiting for Gina to come in. The pandemic period, as I stall for 2 minutes here, the pandemic period, a lot of people might have thought property values would go down, just the opposite. Everybody seemed to want to be in the Hamptons. All across the community, property values went up, rents went up, and it exacerbated our issues with affordable housing. So, I hear about it literally every day as businesses struggle to find employees. They can't pay them enough to live in the community and still be able to survive in business. I've had so many people come to me looking for help, and there's not a lot I can tell them because the inventory is non-existent. So we knew it was bad before. It's only gotten worse, and Diana has been leading an effort to try to work with the community and develop some ideas and approaches to affordable housing. They may not be the only approaches, but they are developed with community input. So with that, it's close enough, Diana, to 10:15. I'm going to kick it to you and you can introduce us.
Thank you so much. Over the past, I guess, 7 or 8 months, all during COVID, we did embark on a housing plan for different reasons. One of the main reasons is the 0.5% legislation that Assemblyman Thiel is proposing to give us funding to be able to do the types of things we need to increase our affordable housing stock. That 0.5%, Assemblyman Thiel proposed that it would be about $10 million. And it sounds like a lot of money, but with property values, interest, rehabs, I know the price of lumber went up, all the things that we want to do, like rehab existing homes, allow homeowners to build an accessory apartment if they comply with the code, and give them the funding to do that, and then put a lien so that they can pay it back. All those things that we want to do, down payment assistance programs, will be facilitated and made much easier with that 0.5%. And as the Assemblyman changed the deduction or the exemption, the 0.5% on any home under $1 million would not increase the tax. So there's an offset on the 2% that exists now. So increasing it the other 0.5% would not create a greater tax. So that was a good thing to do. But the legislation required that we review and perform a housing plan to assess the needs. And I guess in Southampton, there is a need. We have almost 1,700 people on our housing registry. The county just did their 5-year plan, which I shared with the Assemblyman as well. And they have a tremendous lead. Many, more than or close to half of our homeowners and renters are cost burdened, which means they're paying more than 30% of their income for housing. And you know the traffic, and that's caused as well by people traveling here that cannot live here. VHB was our consultant that won the RFP or the bid proposal. And Gina Martini has been exceptional. She takes every email, every change, every correction. So I would like to turn it over to her now to give a synopsis. And she was gracious to come today in case you have questions about the methodology or the goals or your changes that you may want to make. So Gina, thank you very much. We have Tara and Janice Shearer. So we appreciate all of you paying attention to our presentation. Thank you.
I do have a short PowerPoint. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Okay with me. Charlie, can you authorize Gina to share?
Yes, you are allowed to share.
Okay, thank you.
You can always share.
All right. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. And so we provided a short PowerPoint just to kind of structure the overview of the housing plan. And I will go through this, and please jump in with any questions, or we can, wait till the end if there are more substantive questions. So the purpose of the Southampton Housing Plan is to serve as the housing element of the comprehensive plan and to guide the town in its future development of affordable housing and all housing, really, not just affordable housing. But we did also gather quite a bit of input from local stakeholders. I know most of the members of this board were involved in some of the public forums that we held last summer. And we did quite a bit of outreach to members of the community. The housing plan is broken up into 6 sections, and it's not very long. It's only probably about 55, 56 pages. And the reason for that is because we took a lot of the information and put it in the appendix of the document so that the document itself was not unwieldy, or, it's user-friendly, it's short. Again, it's intended to be the housing element of the comprehensive plan. So, we didn't want it to be too long or too filled with details. So there's quite a bit in the appendix, but the document itself is broken up into an introduction and executive summary, which just kind of outlines what will be in the plan. It also talks about the public engagement process that we had, the community engagement. We did hold 9 virtual public forums, one with each citizen advisory committee area. Last summer, we held about 2 public forums a week over the summer. And we also did an online public survey on housing and affordability and community needs. And we received over 2,500 responses, which for a town this size, an online public survey, that's a wonderful response rate. We also have section 2, which is largely existing conditions. For the plan, we gathered a lot of information. I think we have over 30 maps. We also did a survey, an overview of each of the individual hamlets. So each of the 15 hamlets, we did kind of a profile, including housing and demographic data, existing conditions of both housing and population, income, all of that. All of that information is summarized in section 2, but it's included in some detail in the appendix of the housing plan. Section 3 is housing constraints, where we look at regulatory environmental conditions, infrastructure, and other constraints that shape the housing market in the town. And then we have section 4, which is a needs assessment, which presents the findings of the of housing, what the housing needs are in the town based on the existing conditions. We looked in the housing needs assessment at bridging the affordability gap. We looked at retaining and attracting younger residents. We looked at senior housing and inclusive and equitable housing. We also looked at smaller units for smaller households and protecting Southampton's kind of look and feel. And we looked at transit-oriented development and employer-based housing. Again, those were all in section 4, the housing needs assessment. So the sections that I think this board will probably be most concerned with are sections 5 and 6 in the housing plan. Section 5 is the vision, goals, and opportunities. We have a vision statement, which I think I'll read pretty quickly because it is important. The vision statement, which Diana's office worked on with us, and this is the final statement that we came to. In anticipation of transformative demographic shifts, the town of Southampton will embrace the goals of affordability, sustainability, inclusiveness, equity, and fair housing. The town will deploy its resources to promote the development of diverse housing typologies, including entry-level units, small apartments and condominiums, rentals, employer-based housing, and multifamily configurations. The town will promote greater residential density without jeopardizing community character, and will encourage walkable mixed-use development in the vicinity of transit hubs. So that's a lofty vision statement, and we did outline goals and steps to achieve the overall vision. We had 5 broad goals, including goal 1, diversify the housing stock with affordable options. There we included expanding the supply of rental housing, expanding the supply of smaller units, and expanding the supply of multifamily buildings.
Can I ask a question, Gina?
Absolutely.
Where you say the town will promote greater residential density.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we have a comprehensive plan that sort of calculates what our density will be. You know, a lot of those homes are second homes that could have possibly been year-round homes. Some actually, because of COVID, maybe are turning into year-round homes, but the workforce has been largely displaced to the west, some within the town of Southampton, some outside the town of Southampton. But, you know, we have environmental goals too, in terms of protecting our groundwater and our bays. And, you know, I don't think we should be increasing our population per se beyond what we originally contemplated our population. We've been preserving a lot of land, so that land isn't going to be developed. When we did the accessory apartment law, we required, if you wanted an apartment, it to be affordable, but we had to retire a sanitary credit from land we acquired so that it was neutral in terms of our population. I'm a little bit concerned about a goal, a mission or vision statement that says the town will promote greater residential density. I don't know that anybody really wants that. We do want our workforce to be able to live within the community. we don't want higher population per se. Sure, areas grow, but I'm concerned about, like, I don't know who came up with that goal. The town will promote greater residential density. It wasn't me. I think the goal should be to, house a certain percentage of our workforce so that we retain a sense of community and we reduce traffic.
Mhm.
You
That
know,
language can be changed, Jay. That's why we're here. We need to hear from you as we go through this, what your goal is, and that's absolutely appropriate. That's what we want to do today. So we'll work on changing that language to.
yeah, the people are already here. They're just not living in the community. They're going back home at night to some other community. But it would be nice to house a greater percentage of the staff, the workforce, but not necessarily to increase the workforce demand so that there's additional individuals, or to increase, or even to increase the summit population, which then creates demand for additional workers who can't afford to live in the area. So we don't really want more people. We just want the people who make our community function to be able to live within the community. So yes, thank you. So I don't know how the rest of the board feels about this, but I think that's problematic language.
Okay.
Yeah, Jay, I agree. That jumped out at me as well. Because we do have some hamlet, there's great disparity in the hamlets that we have. Some are already have greater residential density than others. And I think that's something that we have to work on is, putting that some more affordable housing in those areas that don't have greater density and not put even more greater density in those hamlets that are already very dense.
The plan does say that the housing should be assessed by hamlets because we do have such disparity in the hamlets. And if you read through, it does say that any plans or projections or moving forward should be done according to each hamlet and what they need, because our hamlets are so different. So that is already throughout the plan as a recommendation when we look to move forward with any programs that we do. But thank you, Julie. Yes, you're absolutely right.
And Diana, just to that point, about what a specific hamlet needs. Well, like for instance, Hampton Bays, we have a lot of density. So I don't want somebody saying, oh, we have to build more affordable housing in Hampton Bays because they're already dense and need some more housing.
More affordable. That is one of the affordable hamlets. Absolutely. So that's why throughout the plan, when you do read it, it does say that any suggestions or programs have to be done with the hamlet consideration because we have such a diverse need in the different hamlets. But absolutely, Julie, because we wouldn't want that. I mean, that's why we did the accessory apartment law the way we did, referencing the density in the hamlets. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Diana, this is John. We discussed this when you had briefed us, and I think I spoke with the supervisor about this as well. The word density, I think we're probably all in agreement. I won't speak for others, but certainly I'll echo what the supervisor said and Julie just now, that the word density jumps off the page. It is not our goal, and it contravenes a lot of the things that we're working on right now, or contradicts a lot of the things that we're trying to work on right now. So I totally agree with removing that as a goal or a statement in the housing plan. I do think though that where we probably should have better concentration is I know I participated in some of the outreach meetings, and it was striking the difference between the different areas in town. And I don't know how we reconcile all of that. I think this is a good start, but that's where we're going. That's where the rubber meets the road. And we have, I think by our calculations, it's roughly 60% of just the government staff live outside of Southampton. That's a lot, and contributes to all the other issues that we've been talking about, traffic and so forth. So I just want to say that I agree with I have the same concerns about the the statement of density.
Well, we can say something like the town will work to provide a continuum of housing without jeopardizing community character. So we can just take out that whole promote greater density language and put it in with, that we will continue to work to provide a continuum of housing, from small to rich.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, I would like that. And I think, preserving community character is important. And I know in some of the meetings that we had throughout the town, we were looking at concepts like infill, areas that have already been disturbed, and mixed use in our business districts. And, that may actually bring people into a business area, which might increase density in those specific areas. So I saw in some of the later goals that was addressed. And when I read this, that's kind of where my mind went. But we certainly wouldn't want to have promote greater residential density in our mission statement. So I'd appreciate it if we.
Right. And, some of what you're saying, Tommy John, is really like a shifting of density
Yeah.
toward walkability, toward downtown, so that people don't have to use their vehicles. They can walk to things. It's
And promote the business in the district.
and if we're able to get this 0.5% tax, some of what this comes down to is just being able to bridge the gap in affordability. So, rather than seeing something, become a summer home, it stays a year-round home, because we can now bridge the difference so that a young family, whatever, might be able to afford it, who lives and works in the community. Or maybe somebody can stay in their home who is tempted to sell it as a summer home because of the high value, or even rent it as a summer home. So that's really not increasing density. You're still going to have that population there, but it'll be better if it's people working in the community, so we don't then have to bring in additional people to service the tourist home, the tourism home, the seasonal home.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, because that's, I think that was a misunderstanding in terms of our people. I think thought that our population would go down as more and more homes became seasonal homes, but it did in a sense, but it also, we still needed the workforce. And so you had the people who were in their summer homes, plus all the people driving out to service the summer homes, didn't actually reduce the population. A lot of towns zoned things mostly for drinking water protection, 2-acre zoning, 5-acre zoning, and you ended up with a lot of these mansions, and you thought you'd end up with less people here, but probably just the opposite. Probably ended up with more people here, because you had the people in the seasonal home and all the labor, demand that was created, who couldn't live here and now had to go east-west in terms of, getting to and from work. So go ahead.
To that point, I wanted to bring up maybe a sensitive subject, but and I don't know if Janice would agree with me or not, but it really cries out for a pretty stringent review of how we zone, and we have very mixed approaches to zoning across the town. It's not standardized, and it's complicated, and I don't think it's included in the recommendations that I read. Maybe it is. Maybe Diana can correct me if I'm wrong, but it would seem to me that in order to achieve this goal, one of the things that we need to review is how our zoning laws actually create problems or solve problems as a bottom up kind of review of that process. It just seems to me that there are a lot of options that create obstacles to doing what we're trying to do, but also encourage other things not really jive with what we're proposing.
But no, I think it's important to understand it when you take a zone that maybe would allow 4 or 5 houses on a piece of property, and now you say you're only going to allow 1 house on it, it's going to go from 4 or 5 relatively affordable homes to 1 completely unaffordable home. And, you know, trying to solve that enigma is going to be a real challenge. But
No, I agree.
you know, the goals are good in terms of protecting drinking water, but we have to sort of have to marry it with a vibrant downtown, you know, or someplace, or maybe some ways of taking that lot and allowing some accessory apartments and things like that, provided we have sanitary, you know, nitrogen removing sanitary systems and things like that. So anyway, let's go back to the plan here. So Gina, you want to?
Absolutely. So I'll just continue, and please jump in with any questions. And I also hopefully will save some time at the end for questions or comments. So goal number 2, I think, is where we left off. Again, these are very broad goals. It's far more detailed in the housing plan. It's you know, kind of a quick and dirty here for the purposes of just providing this overview. Goal 2 was to provide housing for all, specifically fair housing policies, providing more housing options for seniors, providing more housing options for the disabled, and expanding the supply of employer-based housing. Goal 3 is to promote creative infill, including creating land use policies that encourage middle market housing. We explain what that is in the plan. It's basically middle income housing. In other words, this is the housing that most people need. It's not the unaffordable, and it's not subsidized housing per se. It is kind of middle income housing for working people. And invest in targeted bike, pedestrian infrastructure and placemaking. Again, this is all kind of feeds into creative infill development at appropriate sites. And we do discuss under this goal, appropriate being, you know, not environmentally constrained, also with the infrastructure in place to support infill development. Goal number 4, provide targeted planning around transit hubs. This entire goal is really focusing on transit-oriented development. We look at identifying ideal locations for transit-oriented development and defining localized TOD vision plans, which you know, will vary from one hamlet to another. And goal 5 was to preserve existing housing stock, and expand the use of programs is very condensed, but really to expand existing opportunities for housing preservation and housing rehabilitation. The implementation strategy that we had included specific steps for each of the goals. And I don't know that we need to or want to read through every one of them here, but overall, for diversifying housing stock with affordable options, we made multiple recommendations, including to perform an affordable housing assessment for each hamlet. Again, each hamlet really is so different and so unique that they need to be looked at individually to determine what the existing affordable housing options are and what the needs are for each hamlet. And you know, they will vary. We suggest looking at single family or housing scale development that is affordable by design. In other words, housing that is designed to be more affordable than single family detached large lot. And we make some various suggestions as to what that might be. We suggest setting the table for more multifamily residential development, again, where appropriate, where the infrastructure can handle it, and where the transportation systems can handle it. We suggest identifying key sites of opportunity for multifamily residential projects. Multifamily is not appropriate everywhere, you know, regardless of the zoning, because, you know, zoning can be changed, but the infrastructure won't support it everywhere. So we suggest identifying specific sites where it is appropriate and where it is desired and needed. We suggest establishing a site readiness program and solicit funding from county, state, and or federal sources. So essentially, if sites are ready for development, and if the town has identified the type of development that is desired for the particular site, if ready sites are identified, it can facilitate funding for various types of development, and it can facilitate bringing in developers that may be interested. Money typically isn't available for things that are not shovel ready, and developers are more interested when things are shovel ready as well. We suggest conducting regular outreach to the development community as part of that, and providing affordable housing education. Providing housing for all. We suggested creating a fair housing task force. And this kind of gets into some of the fair housing issues that have been identified throughout Long Island recently. And the county is making efforts towards fair housing. And I know the town wants to also address this in a way that's appropriate for the town. We suggest expanding the supply of senior-friendly housing options and expanding housing options for the disabled, as well as promoting purpose-built housing for employees, which is really an employer-based type of housing. And for creative infill, we suggest establishing local typologies of middle market housing. Again, this is the type of thing that will vary from one location to another. And in fact, it varies from one region to another. But I think the town needs to decide what middle market housing is for the town. And that will vary from one hamlet to another. So the typologies there may not be one, there may be many. Review site plan and dimensional regulations in light of preferred housing types, and set density targets within each hamlet. Again, all of these we can reword. This is the purpose. We're going over it with the town, with town board. And creative reuse is also important too. Was there a comment?
I was going to say, yeah, back on the density issue in 3C. Yeah, there's probably a different way to phrase that. Again, I think every area needs to provide housing for a reasonable percentage of the labor demand that is created by that area. It's certainly going to be hard to do in some areas because the value of the property is just so expensive. But I think we just need to kind of tweak that language a little bit. I think we can certainly examine. There's no doubt that the workforce has concentrated itself in the most affordable areas, and some of those areas actually the values are going up pretty fast, and they're not going to stay affordable. But we have seen that, and we see that all throughout the country, where you have this sort of filtering. But I think we really need to examine, set some sort of targets based on how much labor demand is created by an area, should sort of inform, a target for how much housing should be created. Obviously we don't have land use powers in some of, in the villages. And some of the villages clearly are, those are our downtowns, and you hope that they would be affordable. They're not always affordable, but I'm just saying that maybe we could just tweak the language on 3C rather than a density target. Just sort of examine the labor demands and the percentage of housing available to meet the demand in each area.
That's a great idea, Jay. I never looked at it like that.
Okay. We can do that. And I think I see Diana taking notes. So I think I lost my place here. Okay. Goal 4, provide targeted planning around transit hubs, identify preferred TOD locations, and assess infrastructure capacity at the preferred TOD locations. And goal 5, again, expand housing programs. This next slide really just, again, much of the information is provided in the appendices. We did this to try and have a streamlined and easy to read, functional housing plan. We didn't want to belabor it with a lot of data and information. So much of the information that was gathered and assembled and is relied upon for the housing plan is actually provided in the appendices, where we have the individual town and hamlet profile. So we have a profile of the town overall, and then we have individual hamlet profiles for each of the 15 hamlets. And the profiles look at demographics, income, housing stock, etc. We have 35 separate supporting maps, which range from land use maps, zoning. We also have environmental constraints maps. We have transportation and transit maps. And basically everything that we reference throughout the plan, if it needed a map, we have a map in there. And these are the town's maps that they provided. We identify the methodologies, the data sources used. Then we have from the zoning, the residence district of use regulations and dimensional regulations as well. There is a zoning overview in the body of the plan. And then we have the online housing survey that was undertaken. So this next slide just identifies the 8 smart growth principles that I know the town is concerned with. And these housing smart growth principles are reflected throughout the plan. But I do want to kind of highlight where each of the individual principles are highlighted. So this is, again, the goals, and we've highlighted in red. The first of the smart growth principles was public investment, which is wrapped into the goals and recommendations for diversifying the housing stock. It's also in the goal of providing targeted planning around transit hubs, and public investment is reflected in other sections of the housing plan, including section 6, which looks at potential partners and funding sources, including federal grants and funding sources and public-private partnerships. Development, again, smart growth principle number 2, development is reflected in goal 1 and in goal 3, which is promoting creative infill, and in goal 4, provide targeted planning around transit hubs. I think speaks to every one of the smart growth principles. And in section 3.2 of the plan, the housing plan does examine infrastructure constraints in details. And this includes water, transit, sewer, and other natural areas that are undevelopable for purposes of preservation of natural resources. Smart growth principle number, I think we're on 3, was conservation, which is reflected in goal 1, diversifying housing options, and the providing goal 4, providing transit, targeted planning around transit hubs. And we also look at conservation in map 23 in appendix B, which identifies the conservation areas, and section 3.3, where we discuss protected lands and the Central Pine Barrens. The smart growth principle associated with coordination is included in various sections of the housing plan, including section 6, where we look at potential partners and funding sources, including the housing authority, federal grants and funding sources, public-private partnerships, nonprofits, and local agencies for coordination. And the smart growth principle associated with community design is, again, sprinkled kind of throughout the housing plan, specifically throughout goal 1, diversifying housing option. We do make recommendations about affordable housing assessments for each hamlet, and introducing single family or housing scale development that is affordable by design. When we did the online survey, we found that although the majority of housing in the town is single family detached, that was the type of housing that most folks wanted. based on the survey. And not only did we have the online survey where we had over 2,500 responses, we also had, we did live surveys during each of the 9 CAC public engagement sessions. And it was consistent where most folks felt that single family detached in some form or other is the housing that is most desirable in the town. And there was also, folks wanted to see things like townhouses or other but appropriate scale to what is there now. Community design also speaks to identifying key sites of opportunity for multifamily residential projects. In other words, it's not appropriate everywhere, but identifying those sites where it may be appropriate, and conducting regular outreach to the development community to maximize opportunities for collaboration with developers. Community design is sprinkled throughout, again, promoting creative infill development. And we also looked at protecting Southampton's look and feel was the phrase that we used really throughout the plan. And community design does speak to preserving the existing look and feel for what is in much of the town already. The smart growth principle associated with transportation is addressed in goal 3, promoting creative infill. Again, I think something Diana said throughout this process was, we're not going to build our way out of this. So we need to look for other creative ways to provide housing for the population, and based on the type of housing they want and the type of housing that is appropriate for the town. And the transportation smart growth principle is really geared in goal number 4. We also have map 24 in the appendix B with all the maps, has a traffic and transportation. It's kind of a large map that identifies all of the circulation patterns throughout the town, not only the opportunities for what transportation options exist, but you can see on the map where the transportation options do not exist. And in section 3.2, we look at infrastructure constraints related to transportation.
Gina, could I just interrupt for a minute?
Yes.
Need to understand what you mean by meeting with developers and having developers in that process. Can you expound on that?
I think the regular outreach to the development community is simply for the town to have more kind of control over making those introductions. So when the town has an area that has been identified as in need of and appropriate for redevelopment, I think if the town has, ongoing conversations and outreach, the town will have more control over maybe making some introductions with those developers. It's really just maintaining communication. It's not necessarily to market anything specific to a specific developer, but just maintaining that outreach and those kind of relationships with the development community.
Yeah, I have to say I find that problematic, but I can discuss that offline.
Okay. Absolutely. Again, this is a draft, so we're looking for those comments so that we can revise, and so in some cases it may be tweaking the language for clarification. So the smart growth principle associated with consistency is kind of found in goal 3, again, promoting creative infill. In goal 4, the providing targeted planning around transit hubs. And in goal 5, to preserve existing housing. And it's also found throughout the plan in other sections where we examine existing residential zoning, we examined special exception uses, special districts, etc. And we identified the existing zoning tools and incentives, including density. Again, this was based on largely on existing. We really didn't have a lot in the way of suggestions for, broad changes to the zoning. This was an overview of what your existing zoning is and an identification of those tools that you already have in place for accessory apartments and other things that do promote options in housing.
Can I say something on the zoning piece of it? And, this, we all agree that we need to create more affordably priced housing. I mean, that's a given. It's a crisis in the community. We've got to figure out a way to do that. It's usually when we get into the details and you pick a site and you say, this is going to be a multifamily project, or instead of having one house here, we're going to have 8 apartments, or instead of having, I don't know, a business here, we're going to do an apartment complex with, 40 units. And typically, the developers who, if you say, why don't you do more affordable housing? They typically will say, well, we can't. It's impossible. It's just the numbers don't work. 1 acre lot is $1 million and we can only put one house on it. So we're at almost $2 million before we start. How can that ever be affordable? The zoning isn't there to do an as of right project where the numbers work. And so, we keep going in the same direction. And what I've experienced as an elected leader, and, Diana served with me out in East Hampton, if every time somebody needs to make a project happen, they have to come to the town board to rezone the property because you don't have zoning as of right. It's sort of, the deck is sort of stacked to the opponents because now, people will come out of the woodwork. You don't have it as of right, the ability to do anything affordable. Now you need variances from the zoning board, or you need zoning changes at the town board, might even require supermajority votes because it goes to the planning commission for a zone change. It's really very difficult because it's a politicized process. People are running for re-election. You get nervous when all the opponents come out. If you really want to create affordable housing, there has to be some economically viable as of right ways that we can find. Maybe, instead of building one, McMansion, maybe it's a quadplex, it's 4 apartments, same size house, same footprint in terms of environmental footprint, because we can require solar and IA systems, and we could retire affordable housing credits from preserved land. But if there's no way to do it without coming in front of the zoning board or the town board, and particularly the town board, then we could talk about all these lofty goals over and over and over again. And, a few will go through, with courageous elected officials who are, willing to stand up to address this crisis, but it'll be a drop in the bucket here or there. And things will get more unaffordable far faster than we can respond to this issue. Now, obviously having the tax, the surcharge, whatever, the community preservation fund money may give us a way to do it just by bridging the gap. Family can't afford the $1 million home. They can afford a $500,000 home. It's a lot of subsidy to bring in that extra $500,000 just so they could stay here, but it'll be less controversial. So there may be ways to do it if we had very large economic resources. But other than that, our backs are against the wall. So I think zoning is important. Diana, I know you recognize this issue. But if every one of these things required separate town board action, as noble as the people who get elected are, I don't think it's the best approach. You've got to find some as of right mechanisms. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it would be affordable housing zoning, whether it's a floating zone that you could put on a property But however you do it, at some point, even if you want to change the code and go through the town, you're going to have to declare what those areas are that will be acceptable for affordable housing. So either as you create it or you try to create it and go through the whole town and say these are appropriate areas for housing and have that floating zone kind of thing. At some point, you know, there's going to be a public hearing and people are going to have to come out and town boards are going to have to vote. So it is a contentious
Well,
issue.
we did it with accessory apartments.
Yes.
If every accessory apartment had to come to us to get approved, that would have been a problem. And so we said you can, as of right, build an affordable accessory apartment, right?
Yes.
In most areas of the town, in the areas that had the lowest population density.
But again, you're adding a residential unit to an existingly zoned residential home. So you're not really looking to change things. If you decide that there's a commercial piece or a neighborhood business or whatever the other zonings are, that you say this might be able to accommodate some type of housing. And the planning board has been terrific. And we have a lot of rental apartments coming online soon, probably a half a dozen or more over stores, because we allow that and they can go right through the planning process. I don't know if we have that in other zoning areas. So that's something that would have to be researched to be able to create that and say, okay, if you are in a neighborhood zone, you can have one of the uses that you can create there would be an affordable apartment or an affordable house. So maybe it's changing the use tables, and that would be something that could be done, you know, proactively through the you know, planning process. And those use tables can be looked at and say, hey, maybe this is a place where we can automatically have an affordable unit. And then it wouldn't have to come to the board, which I get it. Believe me, I get it. It's tough.
You've been there. How many times have we been sued trying to create affordable housing?
Yeah, I know. So,
So-
so there are ways of doing it. And sometimes the use tables are a good place to look at that, because that goes through all the zoning areas and the uses allowed within each one of those zoning areas. So maybe changing the use tables, and they're included in this plan in one of the appendices. So we do have an opportunity to maybe review that and go that route instead of having to do an affordable housing overlay or floating zone or any of those other things. Maybe the use tables would be the best way to accomplish that.
I think this discussion just illustrates the point I was trying to make before, that we really need a bottom-up, top-down review of our zoning. There's too many opportunities to take advantage. There's too many opportunities that hurt our ability to do some things. It's all over the map, and it's very hard to even see that happen until it's happened. And to me, that illustrates that we have a real problem with our zoning laws. And I think I will make a strong recommendation that I think we need to do a complete review, top-down review of zoning laws, particularly if you want to accomplish even a small percentage of this here.
Right.
It gets back to this problem, and we see it. Trust is nice, and getting elected, I guess, is nice, and all those sorts of things. But at the end of the day, you are dealing with people who are compensated, and there has to be a relationship there, but there also has to be a defendable legal position to take in order to make that happen in a fair and equitable basis, which is what I think you're actually advocating at the very top of this. But some of what I'm seeing here, and I'll get comments back to you, particularly on the subject of relationships with different developers and those kinds of things, I think are problematic on its face.
Okay, no, I did take notes on that, John, with a big exclamation point.
Right. Thank you, Diana.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question. So this plan was done to address the 0.5% legislation, right? So section 2 under existing conditions, it says existing conditions of 15 hamlets, and there weren't any villages in there. But we can purchase CPF land within villages, and I'm assuming we'll be able to do the same for this housing purchase. So how do we get this information this information about what's going on in the villages? And do they have to do their own plan? Because I mean, I think that's one thing, that there may be places in Southampton Village or Sag Harbor Village that we may want to put affordable housing, but I'm not sure how it applies because the villages are not included in this plan.
Well, the villages are separate municipalities, so we really, if we wanted to build something in a village, that would have to be some kind of intermunicipal agreement or something like that. Kara and I met with Mark Schiffert from the village, and they are considering on the old Cadillac dealership on the corner there of Flying Point Road and Montauk Highway, where that old car dealership is and has been for so many years. The village is now considering putting in 24 affordable rental units there. So we cannot tell them what to do, but with the CPF money that we receive for the 0.5%, we can obviously assist them or assist the people who are going to be living there or developing it. And that's why Fred's legislation, which is great because he gave us all those options. We can either buy half a house, like Jay said, and then when the house sells, we get half the equity. You know, we can be very creative with that money and how we use it and how we can help the villages. But we really cannot tell the villages what to do or try to build within their boundaries.
No, and that, I wasn't suggesting that. I was just trying to get the process wise. If the village does not have a housing plan, how can we spend money in the village? If you tell me that we can, that's great. I couldn't understand.
Julie, under the legislation, the village has to opt in separately to participate in the programming. So there has to be some sort of an intermunicipal agreement after, if they do decide to opt in, there has to be an intermunicipal agreement after the fact.
Okay, but they don't have to prepare their own plan to opt in?
The legislation doesn't indicate that they have to prepare their own plan.
Yeah, they can go under our umbrella. And the legislation also says it's town specific. So if we go on the referendum for all 5 towns, including, you know, and the village is a part of the towns, if our legislation passes and East Hampton's does not, we will have a CPF fund and East Hampton won't. So we don't have to all 5 towns approve it. Each town can approve it separately and have their own CPF fund, because each town is different, just like East Hamlet. I mean, Riverhead wants to do historic preservation with their CPF if it passes. So each community, township is going to do it differently, but we're all independent of each other. And the villages within the town would become part of us once they opt in.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
If they don't, can I get clarification on that? If a village doesn't opt in, when a property sells within the village, we will still collect the tax.
Yes,
But
I think that's, yes.
But they won't have access to those funds,
Correct.
correct? Okay.
But we would always manage the funds just like we do with CPF.
You know, and if they do opt in, do they get the money, or we still get the money, but it can be applied within their?
Right. It's really just like CPF. We're still going to get the funding because we're the recognized larger municipality. And then we would work with them if they want. Of course, all their residents would be able to apply for down payment assistance, or if they want to create an accessory apartment under their little village codes, then we would help them with that, help the individuals.
So
And
they
then-
would apply for a grant like they do with the water quality?
Yes.
funds?
Yep.
They
So
say-
they could
yeah.
apply for a grant to build an accessory apartment and as long as they comply with both of our requirements, you know, but we handle the money at the town level,
Okay,
just like with the CPF.
thank you for that clarification.
And Diane, I have a couple of questions here. As far as people who would like some kind of shared equity with this fund in the town of the Southampton, we don't necessarily have to rezone these areas. If there's a young individual or a couple or whatever who are purchasing a home and they need help getting into that home, as Jay said earlier, that doesn't require zoning change. Is that
No.
correct? Right.
Correct. That's an
And
additional-
if an individual is a resident of a village in the town of Southampton, would the village have to opt in for that individual to access our shared equity plan?
No, I think individuals can just apply if they're living within the town. I think that would mean we're doing something for a project where we would be investing in hard structure or that type of situation.
Right, if there's a developer or the municipal.
Developer and- Right,
to do
so that
something
would
like-
be for, yeah, I think that's the way it's structured. But an
Okay.
individual, as long as they qualify with whatever parameters we decide, income
Mhm.
levels, or, you know, as long as they follow fair housing, anybody that applies within the town would be able to access those types of grants or rehabs.
So theoretically, we could get a housing program underway without doing any zoning. And I'm not advocating for this one way or the other, but we could start helping people
Yes.
achieve home ownership in the town of Southampton, so long as, if this passes at the state level, and then we pass it on the town level as well in a public referendum.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And we also had a very good meeting with all the not-for-profits in the town, including all the theaters, Bay Street, Sag Harbor Theater, all the different large not-for-profits that have to do with the Parish Art Museum. There's a group that's called HAND or something. I forget exactly what the acronym
Hampton's
is.
Art Work.
Yes, and they're very, very supportive of the 0.5% tax because they need housing for their employees. I mean, anybody who has any business here needs this. I mean, the need is tremendous. So we had a very good meeting with them, Tom Edmonds, and they said, we will support you, whatever we need. We'll go to town board meetings to make sure that, you know, this 0.5% is available for the town, for the people of the town.
All right, I'm going to go on to the next. I think this is the last of the smart growth principles that we wanted to kind of highlight where in the plan it's addressed, and that's the smart growth principle of community collaboration, which is discussed in section 1.2, community engagement, and section 4, the needs assessment, which was developed based on the comprehensive collaborative community engagement process that we undertook last summer. So there is coverage for, again, each of the 8 smart growth principles. Were there any other comments? We've been taking notes throughout, and Diana and I can touch base afterwards. And again, you can submit any comments you may have as well. And I know you might not all have had a chance to review the entire plan. I do suggest you look at the zoning section that is in the plan, which was really, you know, we were not charged with a complete zoning analysis. We were charged with looking at residential zoning and identifying, you know, existing opportunities for residential housing throughout the town. And I think that has been provided there. But again, please review the plan and let us know if you have comments or questions. Is there anything else now that you wanted to discuss or point out?
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I'd just like to add one additional note, something that I brought up in the meeting the other night. In 2020, if the 5 East End towns had this 0.5% transfer tax in place, it would have made $35 million. And most of that would have been in the town of Southampton.
Yes.
So I hope that we can get this over the finish line and to give the towns another tool in their toolbox to provide housing for people who live here.
Thank you, Tommy John. Gina, thank you so much. Maybe you could share that PowerPoint. That was excellent. It kind of took those 40 pages and 100 pages more of the appendices and kind of put it in a nice, concise manner. So if you would share that with us, I'll share it with the board.
Will do.
Work on the 5 comments that I think are important to go through.
So
And
Diana, in terms of like next steps here, because this is part of a comprehensive plan, so once we had a draft that we were comfortable with, we'd have to hold public hearings and then formally adopt it.
yes, sir.
But there was also some reference in it to Hamlet-based plans as well. So does that have to be done first?
No, this general main upgrade to the comprehensive plan can stand on its own. If in the future we want to do that, we've already done that in Riverside. We've already done it in Hampton Bays. So if that's something that we wish to expand on later for individual hamlets, we could do that. Just like you might want to do, I don't know, Bridgehampton downtown, or,
Okay.
whatever other hamlet you want to do. That is not the necessity at this point. This is the overall goal and ideas for what we want to do townwide. And then each individual hamlet can be treated individually at some later point.
Okay.
And I think that's entirely appropriate to do. I know in the eastern portion of the town, people there understand that we need folks of a variety of different socioeconomic incomes and ages and whatnot in the communities for our volunteer services and to do work for traffic reasons. I mean, I think that's well established now.
And I think you're seeing a lot more buy-in from our communities throughout. Watermill, I received a few emails back and forth from one of our Watermill CAC residents, and they were asking if the Phil Young property on Nowendawa, which just was approved, and they just knocked down that old building, she wanted to know if they would put affordable rentals there instead of the condos that they're proposing. And they were very supportive of that. She said it was purchased by a new owner. So Phil Young sold it to Jeff Sushman from East Hampton. And they were like, we'd love to have affordable units there because they can walk to the shopping at the Watermill little, shopping area there. And there's transportation, there's the jitney, there's the S92. So you're seeing a lot of these community members saying, yeah, we need this, let's put it, and that would be a great place for it. And it would have been, but I told them we're getting 4 units there that are affordable, so that's good. This inclusionary zoning is slowly, now that developers are coming back, creating more units throughout the town as well in the different hamlets. But that's just an example that people are starting to say, yeah, we need this. We need it for our kids, for us.
In addition to that, we've experienced this at the town, holding employees in businesses, in government, in schools, whether it's teachers or janitors or building inspectors or whomever. The trade parade is just, it's a bear and people don't want to deal with it and come out here. So what we're seeing is a high turnover rate in educators and, people who are working for our villages as well as our businesses and restaurants. So it truly is a crisis. East and west.
I know, and we're trying as hard as we can, and you guys have been awesome. This town board has been amazing, so I commend you for that. It's never easy, and you guys have had the courage to accept applications and move forward on many different things, and that's greatly appreciated, because I think it's time. People are starting to say, we got to do this. So thank you for that. Gina, thank you. You were amazing. Janice, thank you for all your hard work. I know this is going to be your baby. Part of your planning document, but I think it was time to get this done, and I appreciate everybody's input. Kara's been amazing too. I mean, we're meeting with developers really almost twice a week now. We get calls and questions, so that's kind of good.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna move on in our agenda. Hopefully a less controversial topic, the tub grinder. Let's see if we can get Christine Fenton into the mix here, our town engineer, municipal works director. So while she comes in, as you know, we had a mechanical fire in the apparatus of our tub grinder, which is an really important piece of equipment, very expensive piece of equipment. It allows our, the landscaping debris that comes into the facility then to be, I guess, turned into compost or screened. I don't know, maybe Christine can explain what it does, but apparently it was not salvageable. And now we have to figure out another plan. So Christine, are you there?
She's coming.
There
We
she
had a fire.
You
I was
unmuted?
that. I know that fires and hydraulic hoses and electric, it's just good.
All right, Chris, can you, I don't know if you heard what I said, but I basically was trying to introduce it. So can you introduce it again?
I appreciate that. I'm gonna hang up my phone to take off that feedback. So we have 3 vegetative yard waste facilities, Hampton Bays, North Sea, and West Hampton. We're receiving a lot of material, increased substantially after 2017. We receive leaves and wood waste. The tub grinder was used to process the wood waste into chips so that we could make mulch out of it and also use it as a thermal element to help cook our compost a little bit quicker. We had a 2005 tub grinder catch on fire in April, and it was very substantially damaged. This piece of equipment is critical to the operation. So we immediately started looking at options. Ed Thompson visited a few adjacent municipalities to look at their operations, look at their equipment, see the benefits and disadvantages of the different kinds of equipment. We had a Mobark 1300 tub grinder, which is fed by a grapple, turns it into a rotating tub with a hammer mill at the bottom, and then crushes it and sends it out of a conveyor belt. Depending on prevailing winds and the fullness of that tub, it can throw material out of it. So that's always been a topic of concern when we do our tub grinding, so that it's out of the public area, which is sometimes difficult to do. So we looked at replacing our fire damaged unit with either a new tub grinder, a used tub grinder, or a horizontal grinder, which is more self-contained. And I believe that you all have memos that show the difference between them. It's hard to appreciate that without seeing the equipment in operation, but I feel like it gave you a little bit more of a perspective. So looking at all of the options, we found that there is a 2020 Mobark 6400 horizontal grinder with about 68 hours on it, immediately available at a cost of $838,000. It's eligible for a 50% grant through the DEC for recycling. Usually those grant applications take a couple of years to get reimbursed from. It's a reimbursement type grant. So that's the recommendation that our department is making to the board. And we looked at a couple of different options, but the cost was a problem, and also the lead time was a problem on them. So this would be under warranty. It makes the most sense at this time.
So Christine, I sent you sent those details out before. I totally support that. I feel there's some urgency here.
Yes.
We're just filling up with organic waste and vegetative waste. It's a no-brainer to me. So I totally support this.
I thank you very much.
And Christine, have you reviewed this piece of equipment? It's got 68 hours on it, generally, a secondhand piece of equipment. Why is it being discontinued, I guess, is my first question. And how much difference is there between this piece of equipment and purchasing it new?
Those are very good questions. I believe that this may have been a demoed piece of equipment. It has not been discontinued. It's still an active product line, if you will. It's just available through Mobark under their Sourcewell contract. So it's something that's more immediately available. A brand new 2021 Mobark tub grinder, similar to what we had, has a purchase price of $1,020,945. With a lead time of 6 months, because they have to build them. It's not like they have these off the shelf. They're huge. The cost to repair the damaged unit that we had was $373,000. So it doesn't seem logical to me or advisable to invest that kind of money in a 16-year-old piece of equipment when you're addressing the damaged part and the remaining part's still 16 years old, and likely to have other issues.
Okay, what are the are there advantages of the horizontal grinder as opposed to the tub grinder?
Yes, it's a self-contained unit. It doesn't have a tub that spins and has the potential to shoot out pieces of wood, so it's more safer to operate. And it's a little bit more efficient. It'll stop if it has detectors on it that can detect if there's metal in the material that's going in, and it'll stop the process so it won't damage the internal components of it. Where our tub grinder, sometimes you find weird things in the wood waste mix. I've seen steel bars close to 1.5 inches in diameter, and they can really cause havoc in the hammer mill and throw off the shoes. So it's a smarter piece of technology that has the ability to protect itself from damage.
People used to put horseshoes in trees and they would grow around it. Okay, so this would be safer. Is there a potential to get a decrease in our insurance cost by purchasing, if we were to do this, by purchasing a safer piece of equipment?
That's quite the possibility. I have not reviewed that with our risk management, Glenn, but I can do that. And I'd like to make sure that we have, we talk to the comptroller's office about the insurance on this as well.
I know the tub grinder was getting old or long in the tooth or whatever, as it was. So I certainly support this, and we need it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Is there, Chris, is there any residual value to our tub grinder? Is it something that can be surplused and sold?
There is, it's going to be in scrap value most likely. And since it's not, we could take it apart as non-mixed metal, we could probably get more money for that, or we could do it in components, which I don't think the conveyor belt was that damaged as part of the fire, and we recently did do work on that, but it's still 16 years old. So
you mentioned it was grant eligible, the new piece of equipment. What's the likelihood of getting the grant?
I think it's pretty likely. Ed Thompson looked into that with Eileen Quinn, I believe. It's a DEC grant for recycling, so it just takes a little while to get into the queue to get reimbursed, to get approved for the grant and then reimbursed through the grant.
Is there a way to get approved for it prior to purchase, or no, we'd have to buy it and then hope we get a grant?
Buy it and hope we get the grant. The past issues that we had with the recycling grants for equipment was that not for the tub grinder or the yard waste equipment, but for the waste trailers, they would give you 50% for recycling only. When we use our waste trailers, we rotate them between waste and recyclables. So we'll have go empty a green bag trailer and up in Brookhaven or wherever, and come back to West Hampton. And if the commingled trailer is empty, we'll put that empty garbage trailer in that place and pull the commingled out. So we're constantly dropping and swapping our trailers. So we didn't have that trailer 100% dedicated to recycling. It became a problem with the DEC. A piece of equipment like this is 100% recycling and reduction of wood waste, so it wouldn't be an issue. So I think that it's going to be very favorable of the DEC to approve this grant application.
Does it hurt our application if we've already bought it and own it?
No.
Okay, do we know what happened to the tub grinder? Why it caught on fire? Was it properly maintained? Was there friction or what was the reason for that fire? It obviously is a very expensive issue for us. And is it eligible for insurance? Go ahead.
my understanding, it's not eligible for insurance. It was a hydraulic fire that occurred under the cab, if you will, or the booth attendant area. That machine was maintained and gone through every day before it went through. So it could have just been that something shifted underneath it and hit a line. It could have been a spark that ignited a hydraulic. The fire marshals believed that it was potentially electric. Our mechanic thinks that it was a hydraulic, so it could have been the combination of the two that ignited it.
So the risk management folks, they say we cannot get reimbursed through an insurance claim for it?
I believe that was through the comptroller's office as well. And believe that we were self-insured for the equipment at that time.
All right, so what I'm hearing is, we're not gonna get any insurance money for the fire. The chub grinder itself doesn't have much residual value, maybe some scrap. So the thing you want to buy is an $800,000 piece of equipment. So the obviously next question is, how are we paying for this thing? Are we borrowing the money? Is this, we have to amend the capital program? Is this pay as you go capital? I don't have, Len's not part of this meeting, but the waste management function, as you know, is it's a enterprise fund, and we try to keep it self-sustaining. I'm assuming that we're going to borrow the money and now have to pick up this debt service. We've had challenges with this fund. Do we need to pay for it by increasing the cost that the landscapers pay to use our facility? I mean, have we thought through this, how we're going to fund this thing?
Those are all very good questions, Jay. I haven't had the opportunity to talk to Len about this. But it's a critical piece of equipment that we need as we're currently in our amnesty period, and we're not going to have a slowdown of incoming yard waste. So I think that it's worth that conversation, sit down with Len to figure out how we can do this. It's likely, like all of the other waste management equipment that we do get, it's bonded equipment so that the debt service can be
Spread out, yeah.
So I think when we're talking about that, you're going to get half of that. We believe that we're going to get half of that money back. It turns out to be a cost of if you were going to look to repair the 16-year-old unit that we had.
Are we currently, Chris, renting something?
Able to answer your question better than that at this time.
Are we currently renting a piece of equipment?
We haven't executed that at this time. We were waiting to get the stockpile up enough to make it worth our while. The only one who had a piece of equipment locally is also a local contractor, so we would have to work within his schedule as well. So we have the PO ready to go when we're ready to it, but we wanted to make sure that we had efficient piles so that a tub grinder can come in on, and I think we had it set up for a 5-day PO because the funds were limited on that.
And we don't have to go through a bidding process on it. You can go direct. It's on a state bid, or it's just a piece of used equipment.
The rental that we do have, the PO was
No, I'm talking about the purchase.
Oh, the purchase, it would be available on a Sourcewell contract through Mobark. So it wouldn't have to necessarily be bid. It would have to go through a town board resolution to authorize us to purchase a piece of equipment of that dollar value off of that contract. And
is there like a warranty? Do we know that that's a good price? I know it's less than the new one, but it's got obviously some wear and tear on it.
That very good price. We were looking for used grinders, 2014 and newer, and we were in the $500,000 to $600,000 range. So this is a decent price.
This is 800,000, right?
838 for something that's less than, it's 2020 with very minimal hours on it.
Okay.
And you also believe that it'll have upgraded performance too, as it's a horizontal grinder as opposed to the tub grinder.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I know we're seeing more and more landscaping debris coming in. It's mostly from private contractors, isn't it?
It's from, I'm going to take a step back here because we accept residential yard waste. We accept spring and fall cleanup yard waste from residents using landscape contractors that are coordinated through the highway department. That's the voucher system. We receive yard waste from regular landscapers doing operational work throughout the year, and we receive yard waste from municipal operations, meaning highway doing pickup during the spring and fall. The Parks Department doing their cleanups, trustees, and CPF.
Christina, I have a question about the product that is made from these various grinders. I know with the tub grinder, to get a good usable mulch, we had to run it through twice, I believe, right? That was, I don't know, the good stuff. Does this create a smaller chip or something that's more usable for folks to put back on their lawns?
Yes, there's two things that happen with mulch, if you will, or wood chips. You have to, we pick it up, put it through the feeder. It may have to go in twice depending on the screened wood chip size that you want. We had 4-inch grates, you have 2-inch grates, depends on what level of size you would like. Most people like the smaller grate wood chips for their mulch. Then you have to screen it to get any of the junk out. And I say junk because sometimes there's plastic bag fragments, there's other stuff in there. So it has to go through another process as well to get even more clarified. We have people who like to have either, some people take unscreened compost similar to unscreened mulch. Some people like the bigger wood chips, some people like the smaller wood chips. So we can, this allows us to be versatile as well.
Okay.
I'm going to just add something more to that, because we're in the process of upgrading all of our yard waste facilities associated with DEC requirements. We have too much residual material on our facilities to improve them while we're collecting incoming material. So we have compost, mostly compost, available at no cost to constituents, to homeowners and landscapers and contractors. Once we reconstruct our yard waste facilities to the level that we want to, we're going to be running a much more efficient operation that we can get revenue from this nice mulch product that we're going to be making with this machine.
And one last question, can this be transported between our yards? Is it? You
Yes.
get put on a trailer? Okay.
Yes.
Is that the plan, Christine, to start selling the material rather than giving it away?
Once we get all of our facilities to reconstructed, yes, that's been the goal of it. But right now we just have too much material on the ground to do both. We're trying to get rid of it so that we can reconstruct it. We were substantially complete with the first pad that we've reconstructed at the Hampton Bays yard. We just have to, we have a little bit of a touch-up work with the contractor that needs to get done. So we're on our way to getting to that end game on being able to sell this stuff?
So I know we're becoming the only game in town, so to speak. I mean, a lot of these places are closing that used to take the material in. Some because they really weren't supposed to be doing it to begin with. And others have gotten out of the business. So I'm trying to approach this somewhat as a, from a businessman's perspective. And, you're asking for $800,000 piece of equipment so that we can continue to absorb all this yard waste. I just think we're going to need to examine what our fees are, what some of the private sector fees were for this material. And, we may have to increase the cost like we've discussed. I don't think we've put it in place, but I think we discussed with recycling component that we're losing too much money to do it for free. So I think that we have to look at this too and say, okay, what are the actual costs of doing this? We're not trying to make a profit, right? But, if we lose money, then we have to collect it from, across the town, people who may not use this facility to make up for that. And it's not something we have to do. I don't think we're required to be in this business. So I just think that we have to find the sweet spot and say, okay, the private contractors who are using this, have to pay more so that we can continue to be in this business rather than burdening the taxpayers. So I'm sure they'll pass it along to their customers. But I just think, and Len is not here to have this conversation, but I think it's an important piece of this because, I don't know where the 800,000 is coming from. And if we say, okay, we're going to add it to our capital program, here is how we're going to pay it back without having to increase taxes. That's sort of what I'm getting at. That's what I need to know. Or do we have to increase taxes to do it? I'm hoping we don't.
I don't disagree with you. I think, though, that there's two separate issues here, and I wish Len was here to talk about that because there is some urgency to get this in place. Right now we have stuff just piling up because we can't do anything with it, and it's going to interfere. I don't know, Jay, if you heard when Christine was talking about what we're doing on Hampton Bays relative to that site that we need. It's interfering with our ability to do that. We do have some programs that, I guess the larger concept here is that the idea of an enterprise fund for waste management is becoming a non-sustainable model everywhere because of those kinds of costs. And, but I do think it really bears discussion. I agree with you. I think those costs should and could and should be passed on. I don't think they should be held. Right now we're in arrears just through the recycling, to the tune of several $100,000. In addition to that, we have the cost of this machine. I think Christine's done really good research on that. I followed it. I confirmed it. And I also learned a lot more about grinding machines than I ever thought I would have in my life. But that other issue is an important one. And how do we, go forward funding this? If we have the ability to sell this material, which was one of the end goals of establishing this facility in Hampton Bays, it could go a long way to offset that. But right now we're operating at a deficit.
Understood. And I don't want to see the costs for the residential person bringing their leaves in. I want to, I'd like to keep that where that is. So it's really when a developer clear cuts a lot to build a home, it might cost them a little bit more to get rid of that. It's possible.
Something as well is that historically we operated with competition, as you indicated before. The the private industry took the lion's share of material coming in. I think the decline is twofold, meaning that it's, DEC regulations went up. Zoning issues or town code issues may also be something that needs to be explored so that we can encourage that private industry to take up the material that it once had. That's an option. In order to be a proficient operation, there's equipment besides the tub grinder that you need that we don't have. Our separator or sifter is older than the tub grinder and is long in the tooth, if you will. We do not have windrow turners, which would be the way that you mix the compost to make it cook faster and come to maturity in that 4 to 6 month time that makes it most, efficient for turning over your stockpiles.
Does anybody
Those-
else have anything?
Those pieces of equipment are in the line of $400,000 to $500,000. So if we're going to become the only game in town, it's going to cost a lot more money to do that, and we don't have the staff or the resources to do that. That's part of the bigger issue that we're having.
Okay, thank you, Christine. So, I don't know, board, it's hard for me to make a decision here without Len. We certainly understand that you need this piece of equipment ASAP, and it sounds like you've done your homework and you found the best way to approach this problem. But it's hard for me to say, yes, let's buy it without knowing the financial pieces of this and the, how it's going to be funded. So I really need Len.
I don't disagree, Supervisor. I think that my feeling is I'm a strong yes, simply because of all the reasons that we've just discussed. Certainly that's contingent upon our controller weighing in and finding a way to finance that. I don't think he knows about this. I don't think he said no. I think he needs to find a way to do that. And I'll leave that up to the controller's office.
I mean, there's certainly a way to do this. You certainly can borrow the money and the debt service won't kick in till next year. And we could, when we do the budget for next year, we can account for the debt service. I just can't tell you the tax implications of that until Len is here. And, whether it will mean we have to pierce the cap or whatever it is. So I really would like to have Len in the conversation. And I really want to explore these ideas, obviously, of selling our material and maybe adjusting the rates that we charge for the material coming in to buffer the added debt service so that it doesn't lead to increases in property taxes.
If that can happen in a timely manner, that's fine. But bear in mind that as we speak, we are getting a growing pile of materials in our waste facilities right now.
Understood.
And there will be a time for that machine to come to us. There's going to be more time during that period. I think that could be worked out, unless there's something that
so Len,
no sense. I
think Len is back, I think, next week. So well, today's Thursday.
I think we can do that, but I think we need to do it. I just want to stress the urgency of this.
Christine, does East Hampton have this equipment? And I do support purchasing the horizontal grinder. I believe that we need it, and we have to work it out like the supervisor says. Absolutely. I know we do have reserve, but we have to get our people on it. But as far as windrow turners and some of the other equipment, is it possible to share that between towns? I know, they have their yards too. Is it possible to rent it from them?
We've had this conversation internally within the waste management managers, if you will, on the North and South Fork and even Brookhaven. And it's a great in concept, but these are highly specialized pieces of equipment. So some of the issues that come up is that if we want to use south holds, then it would have to be transported to here, which is a very long distance for that kind of piece of equipment. It's not like the 8 miles that we have to do between our transfer stations. And you'd need to have it with the operator and the crew that's proficient in working with that. So you'd be taking them from Southold, the operator from Southold, and then training it with Southampton staff, because they're not going to want our people to operate their piece of equipment, because we're not necessarily familiar with it all. So it's got logistical problems to share these kinds of equipment. Plus, we have the 3 facilities, so we're using it more often than not.
What about East
Well, I'm
Hampton?
just wondering if we're to
Has
purchase
it,
this and train people to do it, we could do our 3 facilities and then offer it to East Hampton to turn their rows and rent our equipment and the employees who operate the equipment to go over and turn theirs every so often.
Well,
Our
I think
employee-
ideally, I just make the comment that, under shared services, and we've been talking about this a long time, that the ideal model is that we have a centralized place where these materials are taken. And instead of moving machines back and forth, people bring the material there. And, that really is the correct way to model this as a shared service.
So just one more thing, regarding sharing staff and so forth. The same people that haul our waste and recyclables from our stations to their disposal site are the same people who operate these pieces of equipment. So we really can't send them to a different municipality to do work for them, because we're not going to be able to move our own waste. So it would be problematic to do that way.
Right. And I didn't mean to suggest that they weren't, that they were sitting around waiting for stuff to do. I'm just here, but because, windrow turners are important for this kind of operation and for a real recycling program for vegetative waste. I mean, I think we're going to have to do this. And I just think, including other towns on the South Fork particularly would be beneficial.
We regularly communicate with them, and I don't disagree with you.
Does anybody else have anything to add?
Just that the time is critical. I mean, Christine, I know that it's thousands of dollars a day to rent one of these, and we are at the height of the season. We need to clean the yards. I mean, it's important that we get this done soon. It's kind of like the leaky roof syndrome. You don't figure out where the money's coming from, you fix the roof. And I think this is one of those instances. So I support it 100%.
Thank you very much.
So, when's our next town board meeting in terms of being able to vote on something here?
June 8th.
So why don't we shoot, to have something on the agenda for the 8th, which maybe could be on our work session packet on the 3rd. And then all we really then I just need to hear from Len. I can't vote in support of it until I know how it's being paid for, obviously. So I hear the need. There's no question about it. I hear the need, and you have to show me the numbers. And if we can do this without increasing property taxes or piercing the cap, then we'll move forward. I'll support it, but I need Len in on that conversation. It's a big number. It's an unexpected $800,000 hit. That's a big number in a enterprise fund that we're supporting with roughly $800,000 in transfer in. Used to break even. Now we're bringing all this taxpayer money into it to keep it operating. And, I think it's the right, we just need the information. I know you need to do it. I just need that information. Hopefully we'll have that by next Thursday. All right,
Okay. Thank you.
all right. All right, we'll move on our agenda.
I think that was it.
Yeah, just update. So, we held our first in-person meeting the other day, and I thought that went really well, and I thank everybody for your cooperation, and Charles, so with the hybrid meeting. I think that went really well. I don't know that we'll always be able to do that, but that was certainly a nice feature. I gave the state of the town, which I think we're going to put up the address on the town's website. And Charlie, I think, is going to mix it as well in its own video so that if people want to watch just the state of the town. I did in the state of the town sort of talk about how far we've come, and we have come a long way. And I want to stress the fact that, we are still in a pandemic. We have a long way to go. And, I'm still looking for the day that there's no new positive cases in Southampton, but we're still seeing every day at least one case, sometimes more than one case. But we didn't get to this milestone without tremendous effort. And, I think that the town address all of the, the town employees and the department heads and the division heads. But, I would have loved to name everybody in the entire town who helped, the town workforce. But, it really was such a concerted effort and such a team effort. And, I didn't mention, CRC and all the work they did with signage. I didn't mention the council office staff and all the work they did, delivering essentials and taking phone calls to seniors. I didn't mention some of the people who put all the emergency orders together, like Kathleen Murray, our deputy town attorney, who was constantly producing new emergency orders for me to sign. All the people in human resources who, like Janine, who did so much to, and Juan and everybody who, I could have gone on and talked about all the little, but really significant contributions that everybody made. And they're not little, they were huge. So, so many people pulled together to get us to where we are today. And I certainly didn't mean to leave anybody out of that list, but I really sort of focused on just the department heads and division heads in my speech. So I hope no one's offended if I didn't mention their name personally, but we certainly appreciate everything that everybody did to get us to this point. So let me think if there's any other things I want to update you guys on. Well, maybe I'll just put it out to questions. I mentioned a lot on that in that state of the town, not just all the things that we have done, but some of the things that we hope to accomplish. And I know they're all projects that you guys are all familiar with. I couldn't cover everything. I know there might have been some things that you guys are working really hard on, whether it's, John's efforts on CCA. I didn't mention CCA in the speech, but there were other initiatives, Julie's work on the veterans cards. That wasn't in there. There's tons of things that we're doing that wasn't in the speech. And it's hard in a 14 or 15 minute speech to be comprehensive. So I just picked certain highlights, and if there were some of the things that you guys are in the middle of that you feel I left out, it's not because I don't support those projects and don't appreciate the work you're doing. It's just that you can only cover so much in a state of the town speech. So, all right. Any other updates? Any other announcements or questions about the state of the town? Silence. Are you muted or just everybody's okay?
No, I'm okay. a couple of announcements. I mentioned that we had our meeting with our emergency service and just a couple of questions that came up. We have a mass casualty trailer here in the town of Southampton, and we're going to be putting that out to the different corps for training purposes so that the different ambulance districts are knowledgeable about this mass casualty trailer. It's the piece of equipment that you never want to use, but you always want to have, similar to our hazardous material vehicle, which is on its way. We have a new one coming. This board put the monies in place to purchase a new hazmat truck for the town, and that is being constructed as we speak. Again, something you never want to use, but you certainly need it. If you need it, it's good to have. I went through some of the numbers from Southampton Hospital, and also some of the things that the EMS folks said that is in communications, in our emergency communications, that there are some dead zones in the town of Southampton, and we are going to be putting out a survey to see where some of those zones are. I'm not talking about just cell phone service that drop out from people from time to time. These are our emergency communications. So we're going to be working with our ambulance and our fire districts to determine where those areas are and possibly address them as well. In the Bridgehampton CAC meeting, something that they brought up, which I think is a concern throughout the town, and that is erroneous signage. I know we just passed a bill. Thank you, Councilman Martell and Councilwoman Julie. Julie Lovewood. And but there's a lot of signage in and throughout the hamlet of Bridgehampton and other hamlets that people are advertising a variety of things. Some of the signs are blade signs, and I explained that some of it was during COVID, right? We have a lot of eating out on sidewalks, and so we need signage to direct people there. But I think that's something that the town is going to need to address throughout the month of June, is to get some of this illegal and erroneous signage off of the sidewalks and off of the sides of the road as well. So that's a bit of an update.
All right, thank you, Tom John. Any other announcements? I know taxes are the last day, I think, to pay your second half taxes is June 1st. Without penalty or so if you haven't done so, don't miss that deadline because the penalties are steep.
I just want to say, Supervisor, that we're a half hour late, and I know we have a little bit of an issue with Janice Shearer being on the meeting that was scheduled for 11:30.
Okay.
So she just wanted me to let her know when we're going to bring.
Cool. If there's no other announcements, we can go to executive session. All right, let's.
I do have one very quick. The Sag Harbor Cinema. All residents of the town of Southampton are eligible for a membership at the Sag Harbor Cinema. It's 20% off everything. So, and that's part of our purchase of the easements for the cinema. So we'll put something else out, but I wanted to mention it today.
All right. So for executive session, we have contracts and personnel matters to discuss. So let me make a motion to end our work session. We'll go into executive session on those items. And then 1 o'clock, I want to remind the board, we have a special meeting. So hopefully we'll be able to get everything done, finish the executive session, and then come back for the 1 o'clock meeting. If not, we'll go back into executive session after that. All right. So I'm making a motion to end our work session, go into executive session for contracts and personnel.